Hi, I'm Conor Byrne, and this is That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you will hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Today, I meet who I proclaim to be the Mary Poppins of B2B branding. She has the magical power of being able to reposition brands and leave them better off when she leaves than when she arrived. And like Mary Poppins, she does it with a sense of wonder, wit, and charm. Today's guest is Rachel Fairley, an international marketing leader and brand strategist who specialises in revitalising brands, crucially to drive growth. Whether consulting with Siemens, EY, KLM, or working in-house with the likes of Sage, Oracle, or currently HPE, Rachel has delivered countless, well actually we did count them, over 30, strategies over her 25-year marketing career. And in 2021, she was rightly recognised as one of the top 100 global B2B marketing leaders in technology. Now, I'd argue just the world. This episode is a deep dive into brand in a B2B world. We discuss what that actually means, the role of data in brand positioning, walking the halls, getting that C-suite buy-in, recognizing the conditions for success. We talk a lot about the customer, the experience they have, and the fact that no one gives a damn about your brand. And I try to convince Rachel to write a book. If you love brand but think it's a dirty word and not for a B2B world, well, you need to listen. And in an episode all about brand, guess what? We don't talk about advertising once. So just before we get into today's episode, just a reminder to subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening or watching, so you can get a notification of when our next episode lands. And of course, you can visit that'swhatIcallmarketing.com where all our previous episodes are hosted. So let's get into this fabulous episode with the brilliant Rachel Fairley. Today's episode of That's What I Call Marketing is brought to you by the Indie List, Ireland's leader for freelance marketing, creative and digital talent. The Indie List provides easy access to hundreds of highly experienced and vetted experts across the marketing services business, quickly and cost effectively. You can check out their full range of services at indielist.ie.
Rachel, thanks a million for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. Great to have you here.
I'm so excited. Thanks.
Listen, we've so much to talk about. I think I was saying to you over email, we could probably do 2 hours, but let's do our best.
For 2 hours, but I like your enthusiasm.
So listen, as I was, kind of reading up and kind of doing a bit of research around you and your background, one thing kind of intrigued me was your first job outside of college was working for the company's general counsel in Brussels, and it was something to do with fiber optic between Russia and America. How did you end up doing that?
Well, I'm already in Brighton, University of Sussex, and afterwards, people seem to have got the memo about like applying to graduate jobs and things like that, which completely passed me by. And lots of friends were moving to London, but on like 12, 13 grand a year, and I just couldn't really work out how's the money. So I was trying to work out what to do. Then boyfriend was Belgian, and he was like, well, let's go to Brussels. So I went to Brussels, and it's one of my few jobs I've had through a recruiter, actually, because I went to this, this temp company and typed it about, 5 words a minute. And they sent me off, interviewed by an amazing guy who was the general counsel of a telecoms company. And I think basically just needed somebody English speaking. And I mean, he taught me all sorts of things. Like my spelling's never been particularly good, but now I can spot spelling mistakes. I did lots of contract stuff for him, sort of supported his team. I mean, I was the junior. I was amazing women Yvonne and Vincent and everybody. But the company was basically a telecoms company, which then, those Pac-Mans that sort of morphed over time. It seemed that at the end of the Cold War, this idea of technology uniting nations, that there's fiber backbone across Europe, from Russia all the way through to America. That idea that if you can communicate and you can, just fantastic. So that was with him. But what I realized he was doing was basically there was a lot of getting the business ready for sale.
Yeah.
I just learned so much. I mean, it's when I first heard about brand, because it was actually an asset on the back. I mean, I remember turning around and going, "What's that? What is that? And how do you value it? And how do you sell it? How much of what is being sold is the fiber optics in the ground the leases on the office buildings, the talent in the business, and then the brand. Yeah, it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary, but it was sort of a lucky break, I think, because I could have worked doing my 5, words a minute anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. That's fascinating. And I love the part about then that's where you kind of started uncovering brand and the value of brand and seeing that. And I think again, if I, was thinking about you, I was like, you've been involved in the transformation, the repositioning, I think, of over 30 brands. Like, it's almost like your superpower.
I'm going to get that on a t-shirt. Yeah, but it's a really quirky thing to specialize in. And I do remember I was doing this job and I absolutely loathed it. We had to reapply for our jobs every 3 months as they sort of restructured the business. And I got to about month 9 and I was losing the plot, because having to be interviewed for your job and interview all your team for their jobs, like every 3 months. I mean, I can't tell you how emotionally devastating it is, whilst also trying to do work. And I remember being utterly miserable on holiday. I mean, beyond like unbearable to be with. And my partner just turned around to me and he said, well, just quit. And I was like, oh, okay. Wow. I mean, literally the mood shifted. And I found myself, I can remember where I was, Cobble Street, very buying, a really rubbish restaurant, but and I remember saying, I just really want to specialize in brand. And so I just went out of my way to learn about brand from that point onwards and to try and be a brand-led marketing career path, right? And I think it's kind of because brand is totally misunderstood, actually.
Yes. There's so much to get into here with that. I'm really interested though in that, because, I don't disagree with you, like that there probably is an easier path, but yet maybe more specialized, and not there's anything wrong with that, but like quite a linear path, maybe if you're, if you're a field marketer. I would have thought the brand marketing gives you that breadth. Can I go back just to that moment of, maybe that decision, and you said that you really need to learn about brand. What did you do to build that, level of expertise and learning?
So I remember sort of interviewing, but also it felt like I was sort of more or less begging in an agency that was one of the world's leading brand agencies. Okay. And I just really wanted it, because I thought if I'm at the home of where all these people think about as brands and how to make it work. And actually it was really beautiful, because I also very quickly understood that I had an understanding of how business works and how you actually, the cycle of a business, not just the year and how the pattern of the year, like when budgeting, when you go hard because the customers are really in the market buying, how you seed all of, but what really struck me was that I understood the life cycle. So, when a business was in growth, when it was in kind of retreat, defense, mode, and just the differences between a small business and a large business, between working internationally and working nationally, just completely different mind. And so I felt like I brought quite a lot to the table on how the businesses would digest and actually manifest the brand and how they worked internally. So I got lots of very complex problems and projects they sort of fooled me at the beginning, because I got to work on a car washing brand, and it was all about packaging design. It's all very kind of creative. And then I think the next job I was given was to try and help a business make more international revenue. And it was like, okay, all right. I just loved it, because what I love about brand is that you have to diagnose what the problem is, and every company has a different problem, and you have to use qualitative and quantitative data, and you have to walk the halls and ask the people I call the glitterati, but the people who know what's going on, right? Because they're not necessarily the most senior. So like,
I was about to say,
and they, you scratch at it and you're like, oh, there you go. And so you diagnose and then you write a strategy, and the strategy has to be so crisp and succinct and clear. I mean, the minute I start seeing pyramids and hierarchies and, I just, and then you get the strategy, and then basically that strategy is worth nothing unless the company actually implements it. you have to
Yeah.
work you have to work the business. You have to get to the point where there's so much momentum, and it has to come with a top-down mandate. If the CEO is not bought in, even if the CMO is, it's just not going to happen, because you
Yeah.
have to drive the kind of change where the customer, no matter how it interacts with you at what stage in its buying cycle, and also employees, that they get an experience where they go, oh, that's so whatever the brand is, right? And
Yeah.
that's really hard work, because everybody's in silos doing their own thing with quarterly targets. But all the time I was trying to figure out what the methodology was, because nobody tells you what methodology. There is no methodology for repositioning a business.
Right.
So I feel like now that I've got so many under my belt and been doing this for a couple of decades, I actually totally know what the methodology is. Like I get it. And I know how to start at the beginning, work my way through. And I know that it's never the same twice, and you always need even more. But I think I'm getting to the point now where if I could bottle it and kind of, give it out to people, I would. Yeah. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? But I just feel like in the last year, I'm like that. I know exactly how to do this now.
But, you guys say you've been involved in, like, I think it's over
Yeah.
30 of those repositioning, and that's really interesting, that this moment you're like, oh, now I've got it. You know what I mean? Now's the time to write your book, right? So
Do I write a book or not? I am angsting over that at the moment. Do I write a book? Do I not write a book? Do I do a course? Do I not do a course? Do I just go off and do the next thing? But I feel like I have definitely got to a stage in my career where I want to make sure that other people know how to do this.
yeah.
That bothers me, because there's none of this stuff it's not brain surgery. Like, and
It's not, but it's it's the experience of having done it and having had the ones that haven't worked. Because I know, you said that there's been plenty that haven't worked for lots of reasons.
there are the unforeseen situations, like the company goes bust. So you're almost like you've tried to be part of that rescue effort, but it's too
Yeah.
late. Or that the company gets bought, sort of gobbled, like Pac-Man gets gobbled up, right?
Yeah.
But I think that the biggest challenge actually to doing the work well, whether or not your CEO and CMO are on board genuinely, and actually you really do need the CFO. Because if there's an understanding that this will accelerate the business strategy, that it will make the impact of marketing in the market much more effective, and the sales leaders are behind what that's going to do for them, right? Then you've got to have convinced the CFO that it's going to make more money whilst investing less money.
Yeah.
And if you get that kind of dynamic at the leadership level, then game on.
Before you're going into the work, are you better now at spotting the conditions? I mean, you've talked about kind of right skills, right place, right time. Are you able to see that now? So, where you go and say, I can see by speaking to the CEO that they're truly invested in the repositioning of this brand. Can you spot it under the things you look for?
It's sort of,
Right. Yeah.
it's like they invariably know right? So they know what they're trying to
Yeah.
do. There's usually some discomfort, which sometimes is spoken and sometimes it's what they don't say, where what you can read into it is that they're not quite sure what's holding them back, but something is, and they're not sure how to deal with it. And there's also usually some kind of feeling of impatience, that they've been trying already, that they've tried to figure this out before, that time is running out, that they just wish they could get it done. And when I hear that kind of combination, I get really excited, because if
Right.
that leadership team know where they're headed, but it's almost like they're wading through treacle, they just can't, it's like something is really annoyingly holding them back, and
Yeah.
they want to get it done, then to me that's like, okay, I'm in, like, let's start talking immediately.
Right.
But that's when I get really interested, because it's wanted, and it not become less specific about what it is they think is wrong. it gives you more freedom to not come in and be the colouring in department or the new ad department. You know, all we need is a campaign, or we just need to get the naming of the next product right. They actually allow you to come in and diagnose and explain what's actually happening, and then and the thing is, if you do all of that with data, like really truly do it with qualitative and quantitative data and the company's own data, it's incredibly compelling, because it's like you can suddenly.
I think that is a really interesting, and you touched on it before, is a misunderstanding of brand and the role it is. I mean, often, but I think sometimes people just assume somebody says brand, well, here comes the person who wants to make the TV ad.
Yeah.
You know, I've definitely come across that and come against that. How do you go about explaining brand to some of these organizations? Like, do you have to do an education piece?
So I think sometimes what happens is I'm allowed to get as far as diagnosis, and then the conversation happens, because it's almost like,
Okay.
well, let's just let her do a bit of work and we'll see where she gets to, and then we'll figure it out, you know.
Huh.
But the way I would explain brand is it's a shortcut to a decision. I mean, in every situation, it's a shortcut to a decision. It's so when you come into market to buy or shop or look for something, it's the who you're going to look at first, because who you look at first is often who you end up buying from. It's the, am I making the right decision? Yeah, so this is how I feel about the brand, the company that I'm making this purchase or commitment to. So, because, you know, brand is important for being an employee, so it's for being and then you know, if you've just signed up, it's the, oh my gosh, am I full of regret, or I still feel okay about it? The, am I getting my value for money? Yes, of course I am. Brand gives great value. You know what I mean? It's all of those steps, but it's that constant reassurance that choice that you made is totally right, and
Yes.
and that you feel good to follow through. You have to have the right products at the right price point. You have to make them available for if people want to buy them. You have to come into their mind really easily in that kind of buying situation. You have to offer an experience that's intuitive in the way that they expect it, that's better than other people's. You have to bill properly. You have to be there but like all of that, it's all the touch points, right? It's the whole thing.
Yeah. My previous employer, and I was working with one of the sales leaders on we were calling kind of buyer's remorse. And it was that thing of, you do the deal, right? And then how do you make sure the 90 days or whatever period after that deal is done, that there isn't that moment of regret going, oh, I wish I hadn't brought this person to the theater. Like, I wish I hadn't brought it, because they've gone on a journey with you, which is about, you know, trust, credibility, maybe a bit of a risk if you're a new provider. And then that's the moment where I think a lot of us walk away and kind of go, like, great, we've done the deal, right? And we forget that the brand lives on in that experience of, you know, making sure whatever it is, whether it's onboarding or just like the success of their campaign with you, it is happening. And that's part of the brand, I think, within marketing, we often aren't as connected to, because we forget we do the marketing piece and we think that's, you know, one part of it. How do you find, or can you find a way of bridging that gap when you're doing some of this work?
You know, I think because brand is often in marketing, and I've always thought it should be attached to the CEO's office. It's an extension of corporate strategy. I mean, ideally you'd work with the chief strategy officer, whoever has that role. The buyer's remorse is really interesting, right? Because we all have it. I mean, I'm sitting on a pair of boots that I really want to keep, that I think I should, but I'm pretending that I've already bought them, and I'm seeing whether I feel sick about it before I decide whether to return them or not, right? We all do it. We do these kind of making sure. But I remember doing this wonderful piece in one company where we actually tried to work out where the buyer's remorse point was, like where the inflection point was. And it was 20 working days. And it was fascinating. Like, beyond that, there was like a very dramatic, have I bought the right thing? How do I prove I bought the right thing to my boss? oh my goodness, like, and depending on the time of year of the company's purchase, it would also be, should I even put it in the budget for next year or not? Or will we just cancel
Right.
next year? Right. I mean, amazing. It was almost like you could get line of sight like 11, 12 months ahead on the fact that company was going to churn. What strikes me is that you have to get use out of what you bought. I think that's
Yeah.
what it comes down to. So if you bought some software or a winter coat or, a new bicycle or a pair of boots, if within a month you haven't actually used it and thought to yourself, God, it's a great purchase, right? Then the seed of doubt is already sown. And in a working environment, the challenge is like this. I think this is the fundamental difference between B2B and B2C. From my perspective, is the worry in B2C situations that you've wasted your money, time, and effort, right? And that can be really serious depending on how much your money, time, and effort is worth to you at that moment. I mean, if you have very little energy because you've been ill, then the effort is really valuable to you and you wish you have regret, right? Going to the theatre, needing a day in bed to get over it, that kind of thing. If you have very little money, then making a purchase and realize, I mean, it's just awful, right? But in a business situation, I think there's a really interesting dynamic, which is that you worry about other people perceiving you to be a poor decision maker or having misspent company money or having brought something in that's making the working life for other people hard. And so there's this anxiety at an emotion, a more rational level about having done the right thing and not done the right thing. And that can eat away. So I think the post-contract period of time in every business, you have to work out what window you have for making that value exchange feel great, and don't assume that you know what it is. And then you have to work really hard on making sure that you don't let that customer down and that they make the most of what they're doing. And I think if you do that, you come to really know them and understand their business. If you can institutionalize that knowledge, then you have very successful customer relationships for a long time.
Yeah.
Not that it necessarily will affect your churn rate, because churn rate seems to be more associated with how prestigious your brand is, how lead brand is. Sort of like the leaders get a lower churn and then everybody else is so much of a muchness. But what's interesting in B2B is that even if you churn with a company, the people who bought you may change job and go elsewhere. And then if you're top of mind for them, then you get, so actually that, there's lots of dynamics worth.
You are listening to That's What I Call Marketing, in partnership with the Indie List, where you will find experienced and vetted marketing talent, people like me, and also people who design and people who write. You get the idea. Check out the indielist.ie.
I'd love to actually, you touched on kind of the B2B piece, and I would love to talk to you a bit about that. Like, I think B2B is often seen as probably the less glamorous side of marketing, right? I kind of disagree. I think it should be more exciting, right? I think often people are doing the wrong thing, makes it sometimes mind-numbingly boring. But there's no excuse for it. But you made a great point, and I read where you said when you're in B2C, if you're selling products to people, you often do it through someone else, right? But in B2B, you're often selling directly to the customer, which is incredibly valuable because you can get a lot of really valuable data and insight. But you've also made the point of there's a huge risk of anecdotes within that.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to talk about that.
Oh God, there's this wonderful woman who had a phrase for it. I just forgot. It's this issue in business about focusing on what the last person.
Right.
So, the challenge, without getting into sort of all the research speak, right? The challenge is if you go and ask 10 people about something and you are from the business and they know you, they will already be giving you answers where there's a dynamic, right? So if you're the head of sales speaking to a really senior customer and you say to them, how was that deployment? How did it go? You will get an answer which is there's so many dynamics that have got nothing to do with the answer going on, right?
Yeah.
And so people who are comfortable speaking up will speak up and the quiet ones will not. So the challenge is that people come along with anecdotes or stories, or even they'll have done some research, but they will have executed it in a way where actually it gives you false positives and false negatives.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that by the way, not that you can't find the glimmers in that, because, so for example, in the last brand reposition, it was an anecdote from a sales leader that literally unlocked everything for me, right?
Yes.
But what you have to do is you have to get an independent researcher to do the research in a non-leading way. And you have to do that qualitatively. And I'm very fond of researcher, she's like a sort of behavioral psychologist. So she's looking for why you're saying what you're saying, not necessarily what you're saying. And then you have to do quant, because you basically, whatever you learn, you then need to test it out, scale in different countries, different markets, different audiences to see what actually gets the volume of truth and what doesn't. And I quite like doing that research in different ways. So I often run a piece of research twice, where once the qualifier to get in is a net promoter score question. Like, would you promote this brand? And if they say yes, then I ask all the questions because I know they're fans. And then the other one where I don't ask that, I just hoover up everybody who's willing to take the survey and is qualified, and I ask them the question. So you get a kind of how the market sees you, like how your neighborhood sees you, versus how your friend sees you. And what you're looking for is the things that your friend loves about you, that if only you could teach the whole neighborhood, maybe they'd love you too in the same way. And then you're looking for the things in the neighborhood where they're much more dispassionate. So they're more likely to tell you when they perceive big Achilles heel. And so it gives you a real opportunity to map business models. You can be really close to the customer or not close to the customer, but you have to institutionalize being close. And you work your way through as well with employees. What makes the company? Why did you want to join it? Makes it somewhere you want to stick around. If you're going to leave, why would you leave? Because you're looking for something within the culture that bridges to something that the customers really want, so that you can say to everybody, you know how we are like this? That is so valuable to the customer.
That's really interesting.
And that, for me, that's how you do culture. You do values. They're not separate things. They're not, you don't go off and kind of pontificate about how you are and what you'd like to be. You look for the truth in the culture and how that really makes a difference to the customer. And then you tell people over and over again, because you have to protect that.
I do find that fascinating, because again, I'm like an employer brand, which is kind of the marketing thing, sits in HR.
There's only one brand, right? I mean, you don't.
But
one brand.
Yeah,
you want to work for Disney, or if you want to watch Disney, it's the same brand. You don't go, oh, I want to work for Disney. That's the employer brand. I want to watch Disney. Oh, that's the consumer brand. It's just a brand. So that's why I find it problematic, because when I hear it, I don't have a problem with what employer brand stands for. What I have a problem with is the minute you give it that kind of label, it makes it an other thing. You have to, if you're going to really, really be a successful business, you have to find people that want to buy from you. You have to really make sure that they get what they need and they're happy. You have to have people working for you that are utterly brilliant at what they're delivering, making, conceiving, providing that for customers. And they have to be really happy, and they have to find it meaningful. And so if you don't have that, you haven't got it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's where I was going. Like it's in different departments, and it just makes no sense. It's like, why are we doing this? And I think you said as well, there's about one brain cell for every single brand.
We did care about, another one's doing. I know.
But this is the thing I think we forget, or often maybe just have to be reminded of, is nobody cares.
Nobody cares. And when that advert burns out, it's not burned out. You don't want to see it anymore. And actually, that's probably the point where it started to work. I mean, Mark Ritson talks about this, about how you can. I think the advantage with consumer brands is that people will find it easier to relate to what they're selling, what they're marketing, because they can imagine themselves as a consumer. It's quite difficult to imagine yourself buying a supercomputer. Or, you know what I mean? It's quite difficult to imagine you buying yourself a space shuttle. Or, these are purchases that it's much harder intellectually. And also, so you can't put yourself in the minds of the consumer. But I actually think that's a strength, because then you have to go and ask the buyer. how they think, what they want, why they want it. You have to learn what they want, and then you have to monitor and understand it as it changes. You can't second guess, right? And I mean, I think that's part of the beauty of B2B, is that intellectual honesty that it's not about feeling it. It's instinctively knowing it. It's about actually really, really seeing things from the buyer's perspective and how you're going to address that. And the problem with brand is if it's split up into different departments, if you're kind of basically saying to people, come and work for us because it'll be like this, or if you are marketing something and then sales walk through the door and it's like what they are saying is completely different, right? There's just all these moments where all it needs is for somebody to hesitate. Like I think when brand is done badly, it creates hesitation.
And how do you get, the work you do, how do you get everybody across an organization seeing the role that they play tying into the brand? Like how are you bringing it together? Like, you sitting everybody down and going, this is what we are as a brand.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to convince everybody of the diagnosis, and then you have to make sure everybody knows what the strategy is without having to get a PowerPoint out. Success for me is that recent. And the person said to me, oh, it was amazing because you explained the strategy and I could draw it without seeing any graph. And somebody else said, yeah, I was able to phone my boss afterwards and just explain it. And it made sense. So it's got to be something that people don't need a PhD or PowerPoint to explain. Like, genuinely, I've got to. And then, so I mean, it's fundamentally about answering the sort of what, why, how, who question, and that's it. No pyramids, Maslow, no 4x4s, no SWOT analysis, none. Then, if you convince everybody that the situation is the situation, and then you have helped everybody understand what the strategy is and why it'll work, and they get it, then you have to put in the labor. From that moment onwards, I think it's a labor of love. Like, you have to spend hours and hours with people and their leadership teams to the point where they articulate it and they start to use it as a criteria for decision making. And if you figured out as a business what is going to be the big lever that you pull to drive the change, then you have to get all of them involved in taking responsibility for doing it. So branch, the sort of department of brand should always be relatively small, because if you are implementing for the business, you've screwed up. The business and then you have to reward, acknowledge, champion, celebrate, share the kind of what's working brilliantly, and really be their champions in execution, because that's how you get an entire company to start behaving as if this is how they normally do things. And I think that that's the interesting thing about doing this kind of brand work, is really, in the end, you're a change agent. And you are both a kind of symbol of the in a positive way, but also in a, really annoying way. I mean, there'll be lots of people are like, can you just go away? Can you just, like, when are you leaving? Somebody actually said to me somebody said to me on a call, like, when are you going? When are you done? When can we get back to normal? And I was like, you know what? I said, thanks for saying that aloud, because then now we can at least talk about it. I mean, they were mortified. They could, that moment where you said it and you're like, oh, so sorry. And I was like, no, genuinely, this is good. Let's talk it through.
So is it important then to always walk away?
Well, I mean, this is the dilemma I've always had, right? Which is that, I mean, I crave doing business as usual. I really do, because actually, I think that you can get into it and become more, optimize more and more and more. And the work is never done. Like, the work is never done. You get to shift businesses and then you look around and you're like, oh, but these are all the things I haven't done, and that makes you feel a bit sick. Well, it makes me feel a bit sick. But I haven't met many people who do what I do. So the problem I have is, if I become a business as usual person, then I feel like I'm not making the most of skills that I've spent years developing. And actually, I honestly, like, my job satisfaction is not the diagnosis or the strategy. It's seeing it work. Like, I can't tell you, I'm not going to burst into tears on, in the morning, but the moment where you start seeing, and you can feel it in the feedback, you can feel it in the how lined up people are, even before you start seeing it in the data, right? And when you see it in the data, I know, like, you start seeing little signs and then it just goes, just beautiful. That's what makes me feel amazing, because it makes me feel like doing all these hours of work every day for, the majority of our lives is actually meaningful and worthwhile. And in this huge world we're in, and often I work in companies where, it's very rarely you're one of 100, like, you're one of thousands, if tens of
Yeah,
thousands or
yeah,
hundreds of thousands, is that you've made a meaningful difference. And I need that.
yeah.
So
It's magic.
it's that thing of, you get to the point where you're like, you love everybody you work with and you want to stay and it's all working and everything. And you have to sort of go, oh God, right, I have to go and find the next thing now, and that's, it's a very odd situation, actually. It's like walking away from a party just as it really gets going.
Yeah. You're like Mary Poppins going to find her next family.
I know. I must rewatch that film and just double check that that's quite a nice thing to be called and not an awful thing. But
Oh, it is. It is. You're up to learn in a life, but it is like, go, you come, you find the problem, you fix it, and then you leave this amazing unit, like cohesive unit that maybe wasn't cohesive before, and they go and they, go on to bigger, better things. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful.
But you have to train people up as you go. So, like, I was about this the other day because I saw the first thing I do within about a week of arriving is like look at all the data for all the people who work for me and figure out who's underpaid, who's in the wrong job, who hasn't got a clue about what their career path is, and then almost like sound out people to the point very quite blatant, like, do you feel you're in the right job? If you could have any job, what would it be? And I never use in 5 years' time and 10 years' time, because people, they can't think like that, but they can think like today. We can all think about today, right? And then it's about really making sure that everybody's playing to their strengths, because that's where you get the value exchange between the business and the employee, is that you've got brilliant work with a brilliant person in the right position set up to succeed. And then you have to try and demonstrate and show and cajole and encourage people so that they do their work in a way that will give it that longevity once the pivot's been made. And at the end of it, you should be able to see that everybody's in a much better place than they were when you arrived. And if you, and not even just for the employees that work, but for the talent across the organization, where the strategy will unlock things for them. And it's really about partnering and being really upfront with people about, listen, I really want to help you, because if we do this, it will make your work. So I do a lot of salary fixing and, career path fixing and things like quite early on. And where I can see it's going to be difficult, my brain thinks about it like a game of chess. Like, if I can just get them up to here in the next 6 months, and then if I can get them through that promotion to there, and then I can get their pay up there, and then they'll be, and it's like, and it's sometimes 4 or 5 just to get people into the right position. But
More position.
I did have this boss really early on who told me to work with people I thought were better than me at what they did. And so I really like finding the people and figuring out what makes them brilliant, and then working out how you bring that together, because between you can do things brilliantly, and everybody has their superpower. You just have to find it.
Yes.
Genuinely. And sometimes people don't even know they've got it, and you have to tease it out. But I mean, that's the wonderful bit of the work, is where you walk away and the company is being perceived and experienced in a much more appropriate and better way. And people feel full of courage and confidence about how they contribute. And then that's magical. That is absolutely magical when you can see that. And it does make it much harder to walk away. It really does.
I was about to say that. It must make it difficult.
But you have to but it's sort of like, they don't need me anymore.
See? Mary Poppins. I'm telling you, watch it again. It's compliment. My compliment. But I think that's interesting that you talk about finding the right people in the right roles, doing the right things, because, I've certainly seen that where people are in a role, and things can change over time as well. That might have been the right role 3 years ago, but they've evolved. They've got different ambitions. actually just having that conversation and then seeing the opportunity. Like what I love doing was like knowing that someone had more to give and then seeing an opportunity and going, hey, would you think about this?
Yeah.
Like doing a project, doing this thing, because here's why I think it could be good for you or good for your development. And I think it's the curious mind will go after those things as well. So like one of the things I look for, I think is really important, is just curiosity in people. I think it's you never see it on the job description. And I'm kind of on a mission to try to change that. I think it needs to appear in every marketing JD.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I hire for.
Right.
So it's funny, you and I think alike on that. I think that if the person is curious, that's everything. Because if you're curious, then you have some kind of va-va-voom and get up and go. Otherwise, you wouldn't be looking for, how do I do that? What are the answers? But if you're curious, you also will feel like you never should stop learning. And so you'll always want to find out what a new or better or different way of doing things is. And you will probably be relatively good to work with because you are curious about what other people are doing and how they think and how they want to work. So, I mean, there's lots of people that I put into roles where they have never done it before, don't have the expertise. Like on paper, you wouldn't hire them for it.
Yep.
But where you're thinking to yourself, oh, it's so interesting because you have done a bit of this, a bit of this, and a bit of this. And the way you think is like this. And that's what this role needs. And I can coach you. And then you have to have that very frank conversation where you say that. And because the person has to feel, I mean, really great jobs are ones where they've got you've got a foot in the comfort of today and a foot in the discomfort of tomorrow, right? Where you feel like, please don't make me do the splits. Like it's that kind of feeling of like, right? So you have to have somebody rooting for you that acknowledges that that's the situation and where you talk through how it is you're going to get really brilliant at it. In the same way that people who, you just want to be promoted and seeing them, kind of, I've been here X amount of time and and you have to explain to them that the job is priced at that level. And that if they want to be at a different level, then the role will need to be different, bigger, more complex, more challenging, And often I find people have never had that conversation. They just think that it's about tenure and about their boss liking them and they get promoted and they'll, so then it becomes okay, so if you want to get to that level, what could we do with your remit? And then what's the game of chess on that to be able to get that up, and and then I will absolutely champion you to get to that level, but I can't just pop you in there. Like we'll have to carve something. It does make it really hard though, because you can't just write an org chart and then shove people's names in it. You have to work out what the work is. And then you have to you have to go, well, if we've got somebody with those skills, if they would do that, then that would mean that we could take that, we could put that here and then, and it's a very different conversation with people who are your direct reports about their team, because it puts pressure on them to really know the individual and know what they're good at and know why they're good at it. And actually, you don't need to know the person, although I love to sit and know everybody. But you need to ask questions that help you unlock what that person could really do. And then you have to marry it with what actual work you have. Right?
Yeah. The business wires.
Yeah, you can't just magic up work, So,
but I think that like someone rooting for you is great because, I've certainly been seeing situations where the ambition is there, but if they haven't had someone rooting for them, it's just never going to happen. So I think, having honest conversations and leaders who are rooting for people, and then people put in the work, right? Because like it's a two-way thing. It's not just, as you say, it's not down to tenure or just a given, but it's really kind of how because it's that ambition, right? Like, and I don't mean ambition as I want to be the CMO ambition. I just mean ambition, and just to go do stuff.
I mean, I like rooting for people. I like connecting people to opportunities. I like seeing people thrive. I will often work the phone for people who don't know I'm doing it and don't work for me, because I've seen that they've got a problem they just can't solve. And it's who do I know who I could, put a word in with, who might be able to help them solve it. And sometimes I get phone calls from people going, were you behind this? Because this just, and I'm like, well, I've put a couple of calls in, but I didn't do any heavy listing, but I am constantly looking for ways to make the work happen more smoothly and for people to have greater ability to actually do things successfully, because we get in our own way. We get in our own way as individuals. We get in our own way as org structures. I mean, the flip-flop between centralized, decentralized, between, it's just, there's no business model that works, basically, as far as I can tell. They are all and all brilliant, right? So, but you can see where people are getting stuck. And if you can do anything to help, like I try and make as many friends as possible where I can just, I know I've kind of arrived at a business when I can ping somebody and go, have you got 3 minutes for me today? And my phone rings.
Yeah.
And they're between meetings and they're like, I need to end this meeting a couple of minutes early, and they call, and it doesn't matter what you're like, you take the call and you just go, and they go, oh, I saw all of those things. But that's absolutely huge to have.
Yeah, and you have to invest time in it, I think, and upfront, investing time getting to know people so you can do that. We're at time, Rachel, and I told you this would be 2 hours.
Right.
So tell me, what's next? I do think a book.
Don't you?
But anyway, yeah, I do. I think like the level of knowledge that you have and being able to, like you talked about, like that methodology and being able to know like how to get from A to B. I honestly think there's a gap. There's lots of books on brand strategy and brand, but I think that methodology could be really, really beneficial to people. That's my 2 cents. But what's next in your 2 cents?
So I'm looking for the next thing, and I don't know what that is. And I have never known anything come towards me in a straight line. So I also know that I won't see it coming. It will be a phone call one day.
Okay.
It's always a phone call and it's always out of the blue. But yeah, I'm deliberating the book thing. Just as you said, I can't find anything that tells you how to start at the beginning and work your way through. I can find lots of amazing case studies, but they don't tell you how to do it. And I don't know that most people won't reposition their business for growth many times in their career. So being able to pull something out and go, I can do this. I just need to do these things in this order. Because I've never found that. I've had to put it together myself, the methodology. Yeah. So, but it's like, how arrogant is it to write a book? And also, will anyone read it? And is it worth it? And how long will it take? And as I said, we'll see. But it's time to breathe and consolidate and think about everything, and also go to the theatre and pick out a kid and see friends that you've made years ago that you haven't seen, and return calls, because when you're in the thick of it, I work till 10 p.m. kind of just to make it all, I get really committed and stuck in. And so you need time to just decompress and be fit and healthy and everything. And I think that's also, I'm never afraid of the gaps between work. One day I will be, I'm sure, because the gap will. Yeah, I find it quite peaceful. Moments where you look back and you reflect on what worked and what didn't, and what you're proud of and what you wish you'd done differently. And I think that's lovely.
And get you ready for the next one, Yeah. Brilliant. Rachel, well, listen, whenever the call will come, you will be ready. And look, my last one again, I do hope there's a book in. There is a book in it. There's a book in you. So maybe we'll get to read that someday. Thank you so much for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. It was an absolute pleasure.
You. I've loved it.
Rachel really got me there, and we talked about curiosity. It is so important for us to be curious as marketers. I was so thrilled we thought the same way on that. And I really loved hearing about how Rachel approaches her team. Lots of great learnings there. I have spoken to some amazing global B2B leaders: John Lombardo, Tara Spain, Judy Nam, Damien Devaney, and now Rachel Fairley. And one thing that has come out from talking to all of them is brand is important in B2B, despite what you are told. And do you know what? Actually, there's a second thing. There is no reason B2B marketing should be, in my words, mind-numbingly boring. So that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening to That's What I Call Marketing. If you did enjoy it, please do share, subscribe, get in touch. Finding all our previous episodes on that'swhaticallmarketing.com. Follow us on Instagram, That's What I Call Marketing, On Twitter, that's underscore marketing. Of course, we need to call that X now, and it's still that's underscore marketing. And of course, you can watch our episode back on YouTube. It's still called YouTube. Yes, it is. And you'll find us. That's what I call marketing. From me, Conor Byrne, your host, until the next episode. Thanks so much for joining. Thanks again to the Indie List for their support of this show. If you need experienced, excellent marketing talent, go to theindielist.ie. Don't go anywhere else. theindielist.ie.